Welcome to AI Talks, a place to come and listen to IBM customers, partners, and colleagues talk about the digital organization and how AI, hybrid cloud, and enterprise software is critical to success. Let me hand over to my colleagues to get us started. So today, very pleased to have with us Jeri Ballard. Jeri is the Executive Vice President at Shell and responsible for real estate, corporate travel, and business operations centres. Welcome, Jeri.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. And I'm also joined by my great colleague, Paul Gatlin. Hi, Paul.
Morning, Paul.
So today, really, we wanted to talk, Jeri, about all things real estate, which is quite topical for IBM, but also all the other aspects that impinge in your role about what's going on with not just coming out of a pandemic, but just generally, how do we transform everything we do when we think about real estate, workspace, workplace? Kick it off. We're all working from home, I guess, and you've got thousands of colleagues in a similar situation to IBM. And this idea of personas, which is quite a common thing in terms of how we plan around what we do with space and everything, technology, the HR and everything around that. So personas, are we going to have a different persona now that we're sort of in this work from home, sometimes in the office world, or is it still the same? And are we learning anything?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, we use personas for most of the work we do that has to do with their employee experience, or while we're looking at change management. I don't know that we're going to have a different persona, but I think we're going to rethink 12 we have and think of them with more, I guess you'd say, a bit more freedom that they may have around work location. I think there were assumptions that, of the 12 personas, there were very few of them that were very flexible working. And I think what we're going to wind up having to do is really look at the 12 around what they may need in the future if they have the choice of where they work. We've proven through COVID and this mass work from home experiment we've all been on, is that groups that we didn't think would work effectively remotely, either due to a technology limitation. So for instance, our teams that work with seismic data, they couldn't work effectively from home. And actually with what our IT group has been able to pull off, they actually can work effectively remotely. So it's going to make us rethink, I think, the whole area around the personas and just how flexible work can be about the work coming to the people versus the people coming to the work.
So, Jeri, this is interesting. So I think what you're saying then is that, you found, I think we've similarly found that, people are working either better in a remote setting or finding new colleagues to work with or getting either, happier workspace or not. And, in Shell's perspective, how do you look at a massive amount of data that you've collected, like we have, about those sort of nuances in behavior between people? Have you got anything you can talk to about that?
Yeah, well, obviously making, we, as all companies, we've got a lot of data, and making sense out of it and turning it into something that's actionable is always the challenge, or something insightful that's either going to help you run your business better, drive better decision making, something along those lines, or just give you insights you didn't have before. And we're always finding that when we use data, we debunk a lot of myths. We've even simple things around, when we've put sensors in around how space is used, we always come back with, when you ask people how they think the space is being used versus the data we get back, it's always actually very different than what people perceive. So having the data really does help you to truly understand what's going on. And we've even looked for some, you'd say insights, correlations that weren't obvious in the beginning. We had the opportunity in the not too recent past to have some Watson time with IBM, where we took just a variety of data we had in real estate, but also including some HR data. We do an annual survey of employees, and we took our Shell People survey information. So we took all this information, put it into Watson to see what interesting correlations could come out. And there were correlations that we had not expected at all. I think one of the more interesting ones was looked at our Shell People survey data around employee engagement, which employee engagement tends to be a reflection of how happy people are in their job. And it looked at that with where is their line manager sitting relative to the person? So that was additional information we'd put into the system. And the data came out quite varied around the world. So an example would be in India, it showed that for staff in India, the closer their line manager sat to them, so the less remote line managers they had, the happier employees were. In the US, it was showing us that it actually didn't have a bearing. It was almost the same people who had a remote line manager versus someone who had a line manager in the same location, same city, about the same employee engagement scores. But contrary to that, in the UK, it was showing that staff that had a boss sitting in the same location were less happy than people who had a remote line manager. And that was something, again, a correlation that we had not expected at all. But that was something that Watson was able to pick up on that. We found that to be very interesting.
That is fascinating.
Jeri, Shell Retail uses our tri-rig replication for lease management, for your petrol stations across the world. And we know you've got, a lot of petrol stations. But, how do you see the role of the petrol station changing, in the light of the UK government's directive by banning, petrol diesel cars by 2030?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a great question. Well, when you look at the energy transition that's going to be taking place, where it's going to be a global migration from fossil fuels to renewable or low carbon, significantly low carbon fuels, that's going to change a lot of aspects in life. And it will depend on the different sectors you look at, how they're going to decarbonize. So around petrol stations, if you think of electronic charging is what one direction things are going to certainly go, is electric vehicles. And that works great for the smaller, your personal forms of transportation. Even for Shell, we have 40,000 electric charging points. We're going to be going up to 500,000 of them by 2025. So a big jump for us in electric charging. But also when you look at things like what it's going to take to decarbonize for heavy trucks, for lorries, they're going to need the electric vehicles, or electric charging doesn't support that today, because what they need a different kind of power load. For them, something like the stations going more to providing hydrogen is one direction. One step on the decarbonization journey is you first go to biofuels. So you can do biofuels, which are lower carbon, then go into hydrogen. So it is a journey along that lower carbon fuel source is how the evolution is likely to progress.
Oh no, that's really interesting, Jeri. I never even thought about the trucks element. I guess I was focused more on cars, but the hydrogen on trucks,
Yeah, exactly. So when you look at the decarbonizing all the different, even transportation sectors, anything that requires heavy load can't use electric. For things like airplanes, the renewable biofuel is what we're looking at for biofuel jet fuel, because for them, solar doesn't work for that kind of an application right now. But over time, when you even look at solar and how it can be used more widely, it'll come down to battery capacity improves, so you can store, so you can better store the power to use it at off hours, because there is an intermittency to the renewables, and you need something to fill that gap. Right now, you're hoping that gets filled with low carbon gas, not meaning petrol, but gas. So you expect that to kind of fill that intermittency for now, but hopefully the battery technologies will develop such that that's not needed as well.
As you were talking there, in our world, the servers in data centers, using alternative power sources dependent on, load, dependent on times of the day, and using, technology to, switch power source years ago was completely, never even thought about, but now is, standard, trying to work out the best way to be powered. So I think it's an incredibly interesting point. And if we are moving more to different forms of energy to drive cars, trucks, etc. in the future, and probably changing the profile of the petrol station, is there a new role for the petrol station? I'm going to charge my car, so actually it's going to take me 20 minutes or half an hour, so I'll grab something to eat. So will there be do you think there'll be a different profile, different persona even for petrol stations moving forward?
Yeah, there will be. It'll be a place, it's a bit of a destination. It's somewhere you will be staying, like you said, for some period of time while you're charging your vehicle. So the question will be, what other things can you do during that time period? Either, activities you can do in terms of, you see a lot of things combining of different types of restaurants with petrol stations. There's even some places that have done laundromats with charging stations, things that, so it's interesting to see what types of activities are coming together to keep people busy, either occupy their time or help fulfill activities they need to do during their day. You see some of the service stations also going to having very large presence with like DHL or FedEx, where those are the points where you drop off packages and pick up packages. There's a lot of activities that can happen around that moment where people stop to charge their vehicle.
I saw just near us, my wife spotted it, petrol station with washing machines in a rack, where you
Yes.
just slot coin operated washing machines, which is like, never seen that before. And it looks like an independent guy is obviously trying to be a bit more entrepreneurial about his business. Talks to your point, so that's great.
Jeri, I was interested around, part of your role is around corporate travel, and certainly over the last 12 months, a huge reduction in people traveling around. And certainly if I look at my own travel, it's been pretty much cut to zero. I'm sure that's reflected across most organizations. So there must have been a huge saving on travel expenses. And one of the things I was interested just to understand from your perspective is, when things get back to more of a normal way of working, do you think the way that people travel will revert how they used to, or do you think there'll be a new way of working based on the experience in 2020, 2021?
Yeah, well, first of all, yes, we have saved quite a lot of money on travel over the last 12 months. And I do think people have proven that there's ways of getting things done without having to get on a plane. I think we're going to be more purposeful about the travel that happens, of why people are going. Is there another way of doing this meeting that doesn't require everyone to get on a plane and all meet at some point in the world? From a work-life balance perspective, for a lot of people, trying to figure out how to reduce the travel for them helps them quite a bit in their lives. Now, some people thoroughly enjoy the travel and they'll always be happy to jump on a plane. For a lot of people, it's incredibly disruptive to their personal lives. We've rolled out, during the pandemic, Shell rolled out MS Teams as our main platform for calls, and that's been a massive success. Just a very good quality interaction that people can have. But we've also gotten creative in terms of the use of, we've done audits by our internal audit team have been using cameras for walkthroughs. So they have someone walking them through places, point over here, turn to the right, go here, look over there. They've done walkthroughs with that. Used drone technology that's helped people not have to. One, it's also safer that people don't have to often climb up and around on equipment, but they can use drones to view things as well. Seeing how technology can fill some of that gap. And one of the things we're actually talking about defining is what becomes worthy of travel. About half of our travel is internal related activities. So the other half is meeting with customers, stakeholders around the world, business partners. But half of the travel is essentially Shell people meeting with other Shell people to reduce just the amount of travel that we need to sustain going forward.
So that's fascinating, Jeri. I mean, it'll be just interesting when you say, once we've all had the vaccine and things do get back to a level of normality, how much of that you can implement. So no, really interesting. Thank you.
Jeri, on that theme then, when thinking about space, we're talking about space might be changing because we might not be traveling, so space would be is different. So from a real estate point of view, there's a lot of talk, and we are probably generating this talk, the role of AI as a technique or a tool to look at space and actually use AI to automate stacking of space or restacking of space, so that when a business unit manager says, I want my team to be there on a Wednesday afternoon, but I want to near the south facing window, and basically lay out their requirements. The AI goes away and figures it out. And actually the idea of the space planner, that person, that role, is probably less relevant now. Are we a long way away from really getting AI to look at space inside buildings, or is it something that is actually quite close because maybe you've already tried something?
I can see this a couple of different levels. Certainly, I think anyone who has a real estate portfolio and knows how expensive your unutilized space is to you, the cost of carrying that. And I think pre-COVID, you would see most companies were lucky to, most companies lucky to have a 50 to 60% utilization rate in a standard office. And as post-COVID, where we think we're going to be doing a lot more flexible working, to take less office space, you're going to want to increase the utilization of what you have and just use it better. That's where I do see AI can help. I can see sensors helping. When I've had my own teams come and say, hey, let's do sensors and see how people are using it. I'm like, good grief, you're only 50%, 60% utilized anyway. I think you're solving the wrong problem. But if you're trying to really push up utilization, I think technology is going to have to help on that, where when people come in the morning and they're going to want to know where's the rest of their team, if it's more dynamic around where people are sitting, if you're checking in and you want to know where your team is, you want to be able to sit near them, that's where technology is going to step in. As you're trying to solve a problem with many, many variables on it, how many staff do you have? How many do you think are going to come on given days? how many contractors do you have, and are they working in the office or not in the office, and how flexible are they? When you start looking at all these different layers and layers of variability that sits on top of it, I do think that's a great opportunity for AI to look at how you've been actually using what you have to help you predict what you're going to need in the future. At the personal level, you're always going to have the wild cards of, even though the computer might give you what should be the right answer, personal preference is going to kick in, where people are still going to ask for things. I mean, the example I always use on that is, even though we may buy everyone the world's most ergonomic chair you could possibly have, and we tell people, congratulations, you're all getting these great new ergonomic chairs, we will still have people say, I like my old crappy chair and I want to keep my chair and you can't take my chair away from me. Even though there's something that should be better, there will be personal preference that will be on top of that. So I think AI is going to help a lot planning the overall space. But I think when people come in, they're still going to have preferences for, yes, I know you're saying I should use this room, but for a whole list of reasons that they probably have trouble articulating, they want to be in a particular place.
That's so true about the chair. And I think going back to your point about your survey, your people survey, and how you used, kind of technology, like you mentioned, Watson, to sort of find these blind spots. I think there's going to be more of that, especially as we watch how people behave as they move back into space. And I don't even think just offices, but I think airports are going to be fascinating. Mm-hmm. Although there was shots last night on the BBC of Heathrow, and it looked like it was normal. Other than the fact that people wearing masks, it just looked, apparently it took 7 hours to get through security. So you kind of think, is that because of more delays, because of checks? And so I think there's going to be more human observation data available that's going to say, actually, do you know what? We've got this designed badly, or what we thought was going to happen just isn't happening.
It could be something as simple as, when it rains in London, you get a 20% drop in people who come to the office. It could be something as simple as, if you start looking at the weather with how people turn up, it could be something as basic as that has that big of an influence. When we start allowing people to work more flexibly, where they get to choose, today I'm going to work from home and it's okay.
I was interested in Shell because your core business is quite different to a lot of guests that we've spoke to previously, but around where people work and flexibility. Now, some people, if they're office based, have got that option to work from home because they're capable of doing that. But then you've got some parts of the workforce, perhaps people in your refinery business who do need to be on site. And, I was just interested from your perspective, when things, get back to, some level of normality, what do you think the people on site versus working from home would be? And the follow-on question is, do you think ultimately you're going to need more space, the same space, or even less space than what you did prior to the pandemic?
In terms of how much space we need, I would say overall, I think our buildings were underutilized. If you look at it in terms of, I think the people, when they come back, are going to be more deliberate about what is the purpose of being in the office. They're there to collaborate, as opposed to you show up in an office and you sit and you talk on the phone, via your computer, to people all day long who aren't at that location. Because many of us have had those days before where you're in the office and you hardly talk to anybody in the office unless you bump into them when you're going to the coffee machine. Those kind of days could be just the same if you did them from home. If people are more deliberate about collaboration as why they're there, then we've already been looking at what kind of space are they going to want while they're in the office. So if you have a team, let's say you have a team that says, you know what, we all agree we're going to be in the office and we're going to try to do it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we're going to work from home largely the other days unless something comes up. Then what would those Tuesdays and Thursdays look like for them? What kind of space would help them as a team to collaborate? We can imagine they don't want to be locked up in the standard, conference room. They're going to want a space that's more interactive. We've done rooms before that are, you can think of them as a project room, or think of them as rooms that support agile type working, where if one end of the room you can meet around, a whiteboard or a smart board and plan things out, and then you kind of break up in the room, do some work, come back together. Something more fluid like that is kind of how we're envisioning these teams might want to work, as opposed to the world's broken up into two things of it's either a workstation or it's a standard conference room. So we think they're going to need something else, and they'll need more of those unbooked, almost just collaboration areas. So if you think of like your corporate version of the your internal Starbucks sort of a thing, more space like that where people just kind of come together and can talk and can work together without having to have a big plan for I'm going to need this space for an hour. It's like, well, who knows how long they're going to need to sit here. Come when you want, use it as long as you want. So we're expecting a shift from me space, so the rows and rows of workstations. So there'll still be some of those, but less of them, and more of the we space, but a bigger variety of types of spaces to work in. And we still know that staff, we're planning to make sure that if somebody wants to come to the office 5 days a week, they can still come to the office 5 days a week. The office is still, the anchor for us. Everyone's welcome anytime they want. Not everyone's personal home situation lends itself to being productive at home. So some people, getting to come to the office for them is a break, and it gives them a moment to focus. So there's still going to be employee choice for that. In terms of our, our staff who work at the assets, it's kind of the nature of the job for them that they're going to need to show up there. But it's almost kind of the same way my facilities management teams are, in that, if you're the head of maintenance, one of our big offices, it's very hard to phone that job in. You pretty much have to be at the facility. So certainly trying to make sure those folks that if they do have a day where they can try to work from home, they can. We do know that there are jobs that are still, and even with all the technology in the world, they're still incredibly locationally tied.
There's so much you just said there. I love that, the me, we space. And do you think, I suppose it's probably just a general observation that, the layout of offices, and you talked about, more, this kind of traditional way offices are laid out, and this idea now we're going to be much more fluid, and people over video link as well, because you've got Jeri in the office and Paul are working from home. So I think that's sort of, I don't know if it's a question, but it's more of an observation, that layout of offices. I think furniture and all the associated bits and pieces might change.
The phrase you're referring to, it's they're calling, presence disparity is what it's referred to when someone's not.
That's a new one. Thank you for that.
Presence disparity. There's a presence disparity when someone's not there, and you're always kind of on the back foot if you're the person. You're almost the fly on the wall, listening to a bunch of other people have this other meeting somewhere. How do you make that person feel as included in the meeting as the people who are physically in the room? That's one of the things that still to be solved, but that's one of the areas where we're focused.
So Jeri, this is great. Thank you for that. Last final question. Crystal ball time. It's your view only. What do you think 2021 will hold in your world that you're hoping for?
Well, I'm hoping that the vaccine rollout continues at pace, because that's going to be one of the signposts for us to really start getting people back into the office. When we did our COVID protocol space planning, depending on the shape of the buildings, we can only get in 30% up to 60% of the people back in, using COVID protocols of the 2 meter distance between, and having the one-way walking and all of this, so many, all of the different things in place that you would need if there was not mass vaccinations. We still want to get everyone back who wants to come back in. I'm hoping that by Q3 we really start to see, that we can be maybe at closer to our max with the COVID protocols. Would be great if by the end of the year we could eliminate or relax those completely. I think it's never going to go back to the way it was, for good reason. Like I said, we're looking at giving more employees some choice. We're rolling out our version of the future of work. Hopefully people will find that they have some more control in their lives, and that will certainly help them with their work life and their family life, and be able to balance it well. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to the end of this year, as you could say, and we just love to fast forward to it at this point.
Thank you, Jeri, and we wish you every success in getting what you wish for, because I think what you just described is what we want as well. So thank you so much. So Jeri, thanks to you for joining AI Talks podcast today. Really enjoyed your observations and your personal points of view. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Not a problem at all. And Paul, thank you for your support.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul, as always. And Jeri, no, it's been an absolute pleasure today. So thank you very much for your time.
If you've enjoyed it, please let other people know, and have a great day.